My ex-wife showed up demanding alimony after leaving me for another man, so I exposed her lies in court and watched her world crumble. I met Amy back in college. She was magnetic, smart, confident, and had this ability to make you feel like the only person in the room when she spoke to you. I was drawn in, and before long, we were a couple. We got married a few years later, and things seemed to go smoothly for a while. But it didn't take long for that initial attraction to turn into something else. It wasn't so much her confidence as her need to control everything. At first, it was little things. She'd tell me what to wear, insist on planning every social event down to the minute, and had opinions on everyone I spent time with. But things got weirder after we married. Amy had this obsession with improving me. It was like she thought I was some kind of project she could mold into her ideal image. One day, she handed me a journal and said we were going to start something called a compliment journal. I had to write down 3 compliments a day for her, every day. She wanted to keep them so she could read back on them and feel appreciated. If I ever missed a day, even by accident, she'd sulk or give me the silent treatment, then tell me I didn't love her enough. And then there was the spiritual cleansing phase. She became obsessed with crystals, energy fields, and rituals. She'd make me walk barefoot around the house holding crystals while she chanted. She said I needed to purge my negative energy for the good of our marriage. I didn't buy into it, but I went along with it just to avoid her lectures on how I wasn't committed enough to her happiness. As time went on, she started pushing away my friends, especially the ones she didn't like. She'd make it hard for me to invite them over, then complain about how immature they were or how they weren't good for my growth. She even tried to cut me off from my family, claiming they didn't appreciate her enough or that they were a bad influence on me. Slowly, I stopped bringing them around just to keep the peace. And that was just the beginning. Amy wasn't just interested in controlling my friends. She started working on my family, especially my mom and sister. My mom and Amy had never been close, so Amy decided to fix that by organizing these community events where she'd invite my family to volunteer. She'd paint herself as the doting daughter-in-law, always sending updates on how hard she was working to bring everyone closer. She even told my mom and sister that I was too busy to help with these things, subtly making me look like the distant one. Then, she'd turn around and complain to me about how much effort she was putting into keeping my family connected, implying that I wasn't doing enough. The way she twisted things made me question if I was the one pulling away when, in reality, she was the one pushing my family to see me differently. Looking back, I realize it was all about control. She wanted to own every part of my life, including my relationships. The real tipping point came when I discovered she'd been seeing someone else. At first, she tried to deny it, saying I was being paranoid and overthinking things. But it was pretty clear that she was involved with this guy, Rob. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to apologize. She just looked at me and said, "We grew apart, and I needed someone who understood me." She moved out a week later and went to live with him, but that didn't mean she was done with me. Even though she was living with another man, she left all her stuff at our house, just until she could get around to moving it. I offered to drop her things off at her new place, but she refused, saying she wasn't ready and accusing me of trying to erase her. So I had her things cluttering up the place, with her coming by whenever she wanted to pick up a few things, often without warning. It didn't end there. Amy started showing up at my workplace, bringing me lunch, or just dropping in to say hi. She'd act all friendly with my coworkers, like we were still on good terms. She'd even tell them how difficult the separation was for her and how she was trying to stay strong. It was bizarre, watching her play the role of the heartbroken ex-wife when she'd left me for someone else. After a while, I started dating again, figuring it was time to move forward. But Amy found out and decided to interfere. One day, I got a message from a woman I'd been seeing. She told me that Amy had reached out to her, presenting herself as a concerned ex-wife. She warned this woman that I was emotionally unstable and still struggling with the divorce, implying I wasn't ready for a new relationship. She even brought up personal things I'd told her during our marriage, twisting them to make me look like a mess. The relationship ended shortly after that. When I confronted Amy about it, she just shrugged and said, "I was protecting you from getting hurt again." It was infuriating, but I didn't know how to stop her from meddling. Every time I tried to set boundaries, she found a new way to push her way back into my life. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I got a letter from her lawyer. Amy was demanding alimony, claiming she had sacrificed her career and mental well-being to support me during our marriage. According to her, she'd given up everything to be with me and now needed financial support to get back on her feet. I couldn't believe the nerve. Here was a woman who'd left me for another man and yet was demanding I support her lifestyle. She hadn't sacrificed anything for me. In fact, she'd taken more than I could ever give. But her entitlement knew no bounds, and now she was coming after my money. I knew I couldn't let this slide. I hired a lawyer, gathered every piece of evidence I could find, and prepared myself for a fight. I had old messages, notes from our compliment journal, and screenshots of her attempts to sabotage my dating life. If she wanted to drag me into court, I was ready to expose everything. The day of the hearing, I walked into that courtroom feeling a mix of dread and determination. Amy was there, sitting with her lawyer, dressed up like she was heading to a high-end gala. She looked calm, confident, like she'd already won. When it was her turn to speak, she put on the performance of a lifetime. She had tears in her eyes as she told the court about her sacrifices during our marriage, painting herself as a devoted wife who'd given up her dreams to support me. She claimed I'd discouraged her from working, forced her to rely on me financially, and treated her like a servant. Her lawyer backed her up, saying that she'd spent years as my support system and now deserved compensation to rebuild her life. Then it was my turn. My lawyer started with the compliment journal. We showed the court how she'd forced me to compliment her 3 times a day, every day, writing down each one so she could look back and feel appreciated. I watched the judge's face as he read through those entries, his expression shifting from curious to slightly disgusted. Then we presented text messages where she'd berated me for spending time with friends she didn't approve of, telling me I was embarrassing her and not living up to her standards. We shared messages where she told me to change my clothes before seeing friends because she didn't like the way I looked. The judge looked at her, clearly unimpressed. Next, we moved on to her obsession with spiritual cleansing. I described how she'd made me walk barefoot around the house holding crystals while she chanted, claiming that I had negative energy that needed to be purged. I could tell the judge was starting to see her for who she was. Then came the evidence of her meddling in my dating life. I recounted how she'd reached out to women I was seeing, presenting herself as a concerned ex-wife and warning them that I was emotionally unstable. We even had screenshots from one of these women, showing how Amy had contacted her and implied I was in no shape to be dating. Amy's confidence started to crack. She shifted in her seat, shooting me angry looks and whispering to her lawyer, but there was nothing she could say to refute the evidence. Every point we presented chipped away at her carefully crafted image of the wronged, selfless wife. Amy's lawyer tried to salvage things, saying that these were minor misunderstandings and that Amy still deserved alimony for the time she'd spent with me. But the judge was clearly done with her excuses. When it was time for the judge to give his decision, he didn't waste any time. He looked straight at Amy and said that he had rarely seen such a blatant attempt to manipulate the court system for personal gain. He called out her behavior for what it was, entitlement, plain and simple. He acknowledged that while alimony was designed to support individuals who genuinely sacrificed for their marriages, in this case, there was no evidence that Amy had sacrificed anything. If anything, he said, the evidence pointed to her using our relationship for her own benefit, while undermining me at every turn. He didn't stop there. The judge then addressed Amy directly, saying that if she continued to interfere with my personal life, whether through contacting people I was dating or showing up at my workplace, she would be subject to a restraining order. He wanted to make it very clear that her behavior had crossed the line, and if she so much as attempted to manipulate me again, there would be legal consequences. Amy sat there in stunned silence, her face a mix of shock and rage. This was a woman who had walked in thinking she had the upper hand, who thought that all her schemes and emotional manipulation would secure her the payout she wanted. But now, with the judge's decision hanging in the air, it was clear that she had overplayed her hand. And I won. The court denied her alimony claim in full. Not only was she not going to receive a dime, but the judge made it clear that her actions had been recognized for the manipulative tactics they were. He warned her one last time about staying out of my life, and with that, the case was closed. As the judge left the bench, Amy just sat there, staring ahead. Her lawyer had already packed up and was trying to get her attention, but she looked like she'd been struck. She glanced at me one last time, her expression cold and furious, but I met her gaze without any hesitation. For the first time, I felt like I was free from the hold she'd had on me for so long. Leaving that courtroom, I knew that a weight had been lifted. I didn't just win in court. I finally regained control over my life. Amy had tried to make me doubt myself, to control my relationships, my family, and my future. But now, there was nothing left for her to latch onto. Since that day, I haven't heard from her. She never came back for her things, either. She didn't have the nerve. I ended up donating most of it, clearing out every last piece of her influence from my home. The whole ordeal left me with some scars, sure. But I've learned to spot the signs of manipulation, entitlement, and control. I've rebuilt connections with family and friends, and I've moved forward with a much clearer sense of who I am and what I want. For anyone else out there dealing with someone who tries to control every part of their life, just know that you don't have to keep putting up with it. Stand your ground, gather your proof, and don't let anyone make you doubt your own worth. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to call them out, let them crumble under the weight of their own lies, and finally walk away, free.